were upset and angry and a lot of hate out here. And so we made sure that we focus on that. The other component of it was also to make sure that as we're dealing with issues around women's rights and economic justice, that I won't go into detail, but it was very much important about making sure that black women and brown women who will be the ones who are over criminalized when it comes to states who pass anti-abortion laws on the state level, that they continue to do much more, as they are doing a lot. And we thank them for all that they're doing. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues to talk more.
Hi, Derek Johnson, President and CEO of the NAACP. I thought the meeting was very positive. We focused on democracy, but more specifically, the urgency of the Jackson, Mississippi water crisis. I shared with the President how state leadership have starved the city of Jackson of resources in an attempt to take the water department away. He shared profound concern that the federal government is not used in that effort. It is really important that we celebrate the passage of the infrastructure bill so long as the individuals and the citizens of Jackson really benefit from that monumental piece of legislation. It is a result of many individuals going out to vote in November. And we hope that this administration will use all within their power to ensure the citizens of Jackson are not taken advantage of by a state government that have intentionally over the last several decades, but particularly over the last 2 years, sought to starve the city of Jackson of resources to make sure we had a water department that was up, running with safe, clean drinking water. And finally, we are at a juncture in this country. November will make a big difference. And as we stood in this, as we stand in this moment, to understand that it wasn't a partisan conversation, but an important conversation. And that the impact of voters this November will send a clear message that democracy is worth protecting and white supremacist activity is a danger to our democracy. So as we stand here as civil rights leaders, we are aligned with this administration to protect democracy. And as I am a resident of the city of Jackson, we're going to fight hard as possible to ensure clean, safe drinking water. And this administration partnered with the citizens of Jackson to make sure that takes place. Thank you.
Thank you. Damon? Thanks, Derek.
Damon Hewitt, President and Executive Director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. We had a frank conversation with President Biden, a very honest and open conversation, and what we're seeking overall is not a singular demand, but really a relationship and an alignment of interests. And you could hear in the President's speech last night, you could hear in this meeting today, there is alignment about protecting democracy. We know that Black Americans are among the hardest working, most patriotic people in this country. And we need a democracy that works for Black America and that works for all of America. We need a democracy that does not condone, allow, or facilitate attacks on its own people, whether that be through voter suppression, whether that be what we saw during the January 6th insurrection, whether that be through police and state violence, or whether that be through white supremacy, which drives a lot of what we're seeing. And so that alignment with the President is there. What we need to do is use political muscle in the civil rights community and also among elected officials to push this agenda forward. Americans, the media may be focused on the elections, which is totally understandable, but we are playing not a long game, but a long strategy. It's about what happens today. It's about what happens in the midterm elections, whether people can cast their votes, whether the votes will be counted, and whether the election results will be protected from election subversion and efforts to overturn them, legitimate results. But it's also about what happens beyond these elections, because we do believe at the Lawyers Committee that democracy is a promise, and the promise is about safety, health, opportunity, and prosperity for Black Americans and all Americans. That is our agenda. Two other points to lift up. With respect to policing issues, I made clear to President Biden that accountability is not an adjunct, a side issue. In fact, police accountability is part of the key to making America safer. And so we urged in his ongoing framing of his Safer America plan to lift up the pieces that are not just about additional police officers, but the pieces that are about the health and safety of communities writ large, and also to ensure that any future calls for executive action or legislation include meaningful accountability. I will say the president did lift up the National Police Misconduct Database, which is part of his policing executive order. We want to see that built, created, flourish, and have every law enforcement agency in the country participate in that. A second piece, a couple of us separately lifted up with the president the issue of black farmers. And we know that farmers are facing, across the board, are facing incredible odds, but to them, access to resources is a part of keeping the promise of democracy real. Thank you.
Thank you. Janae?
Good afternoon. Janae Nelson, President and Director Counsel of the Legal Defense Fund. This afternoon, we had a meeting with the president that builds on a legacy of engagement with administrations on behalf of black communities across the country. And I stand here today with my civil rights colleagues in our call in amplifying the alarm that we've been sounding for a very long time, that our democracy is in peril, that we are facing an existential crisis that black people have known for a very long time, that the attack on the right to vote is an attack on our democracy, it's an attack on our future, and it's an attack on our freedoms. Today we emphasized with the president that every issue, be it economic justice, criminal justice, health, reproductive rights, all of them ladder up to the mechanism of democracy that makes the preservation of those rights possible. And so we issued last weekend, on the anniversary of the March on Washington, a declaration that we are in a state of emergency. And we continue to sound that alarm. And today we were able to talk to the president not only about the most urgent issues facing black communities, other communities of color, and our democracy as a whole, but what the long-term agenda is for this administration. We need to secure voting rights first and foremost. And we do that by exercising the right to vote this November and ensuring that we elect a Congress that will enact federal legislation to protect the right to vote. That is the most important agenda item that we have. And that opening will allow us to pass legislation that advances economic justice, that protects reproductive rights, that expands safety, and that protects the future of our multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. I will say one word about the issue of public safety. We made clear that our vision for that and the mechanism of getting there may be different, and our unity will not be compromised by a lack of uniformity on outcome. But we will continue to press this administration. That is why we have these meetings, to talk about and amplify the voices of black communities, but to also be in unison about the protection of our democracy and how essential it is to all Americans that we maintain it, that we protect it, and that we do everything possible to advance it in order to secure the benefits of the diversity of this nation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Thelma, you were next. No, Thelma.
You go ahead.
No, Thelma was next. Okay, Dr. Daly was supposed to be next. I know my betters. My name is Maya Wiley. I am the president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. And today we stand here as black leaders always have, as the original patriots, as the people who were the original flame bearers for that torch that the president talked about last night, that torch, that flame of freedom. And the message today was that freedom requires the kind of democratic justice that the president so well said last night has been denied to too many of us. And it was a meeting where we sat together and where I can honestly say we had a frank conversation about just how critical it is to understand how white supremacy is undermining the very fabric of democracy for every single American. But we also made it clear that, as he said last night, so rightly, that violence cannot be used as a tool for those who have lost an election, We also, and I certainly made clear, that from a leadership conference perspective, we have to also recognize how too often that tool of violence sometimes gets meted out in our communities through how policing happens. And that it is critical, particularly at a time when we are seeing the Shay Mosses and Ruby Freemans, the poll workers, the people, the patriots, who show up every day just to make sure people can exercise that right to vote, are also protected, and that our communities are not intimidated. And so today we stand here thankful for a productive meeting, grateful for a partnership that, like all families, is real, is deep, and we don't always agree, but we always stand together, because at the end of the day, we will continue to be the torchbearers for a democracy that includes all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Dillon.
I am Thelma Daly, President of the National Council of Negro Women, and I stand here with these great civil rights leaders today. I want to say we had a very positive meeting with the President today. Sometimes you can talk to people, and you can talk, but they may not hear you. But I guarantee today that the President heard us, and we heard the President. I think we all stand here to protect our great democracy. If our democracy is crumbled, where will we be? And as I speak for black women, you know that black women undergird the voting process in this United States of America. And black women will stand there to protect the voting rights, to do away with the suppression, and we will be there to fight for democracy. So as I stand here as a black woman, I would say, hold torch to high for our democracy, because if we crumble it bit by bit, it will be very hard to pace back together. I thank you for this great opportunity, standing here with these great leaders of the United States of America, the greatest country in the world.
Thank you very much. We're going to entertain a few questions if there are any. Go ahead.
Did the President or anyone from the White House outline any policies, executive actions that they can take with the current state of Congress, that they can take to back up his speech yesterday, either on voting rights or on police?
We discussed the executive order he did around policing after George Floyd, and we discussed that more may be necessary, but that would be subsequent to the general election. What we wanted was a commitment that if there is an increase in his party, which we did not talk partisan politics, that we would go for legislation, not just executive orders. So we didn't want to lock ourselves into an executive order commitment without getting a commitment that if you got 2 or 3 more Senate seats and more of the House, will we be able to come back with a George Lewis bill? I even brought up to him, the Emancipation Proclamation was only an executive order. It did not become law till the 13th Amendment. We're shooting for the law. We will come back with the executive orders, which was understood.
Did he provide assurance that he would prioritize
Yes.
legislation?
Yes.
And then on voting rights as well, did
Yeah.
they say they didn't take any action?
Yes, the President made very clear that he would move to usher Congress to pass the Voting Rights Advancement Act if he had a cooperative Congress. So it is essential that we help to deliver that cooperative Congress in November. He also made a commitment to implement the Bloody Sunday executive order that
Right.
contains very important voter registration expansion among federal agencies. The number of voters that order could potentially add to the voting rolls could be an absolute game changer if it is fully implemented, and he had already committed to doing so, and we urged him to do it as quickly as possible.
I just want to add one thing. He also
Go ahead, get to the
was
mic.
very, very clear about making sure that we protect voters in this election season. And so they have the ability to do that through the Department of Justice and other means.
Say one thing. The implementation of that voting rights executive order, it's important to understand that even though elections are pending, this is not a political play, certainly not from us, and not even from this White House. It's a play to preserve democracy. It's the theme that you hear from us consistently. What's most important is that we have an open, fair, and safe system, and that's exactly what's under threat.
You had a question, sir?
Yes. What can be done in the meantime for
I'm going to ask, one important lever that the government has is the enforcement powers of the Department of Justice.
Right.
Let's not forget that the Department of Justice is empowered by statutes, rules, and by their very mission to protect the ballot box, to protect the right to vote, and they have a number of tools in their own hands in order to be able to do that. So it's paramount that the Justice Department be given the latitude and the freedom, which I do think that the Attorney General and his leadership team are absolutely committed to that.
But I think also, in addition to that, and we discussed that with him, the things that he's been able to get done in the last 60 days with the Inflation Act, Reduction Act, what he's done in terms of infrastructure, we discussed that there is disproportionate impact when you talk about climate change with the toxic waste dumps in our community. Therefore, there must be a balanced look at how we get disproportionate amount of the money to deal with that. We talked to him about it, and he committed to look at the disparity in the things he's already done. Part of the infrastructure bill, Jackson, Mississippi, was clearly neglected. We can correct a lot of that with the infrastructure bill. So what he's already done in the last 60 to 90 days, which we applaud, must be put through racial lenses so that it goes where it has been neglected, and that was a large part of the meeting.
Let me underscore this, and so a good part of this is not simply passing new legislation or making new policy. It's about equitably implementing the policies that are on the books. Number one, 1.2 trillion in infrastructure dollars. The CHIPS and Science Act, which is multiples of billions. The new Climate Act, which is multiples of billions. Those have to be implemented in a way that black and brown workers, disadvantaged workers, have an opportunity for those jobs, that businesses in our community participate in that. My concern expressed is that the old dot-com digital divide not morph itself into the new climate divide, where as we implement this and where we move in a certain direction, black and brown communities are left behind. It's going to require the president's leadership. I think he's committed to that, but also a great deal of vigilance to ensure that that takes place.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with my brothers. There were two specific things the administration can do that I raised, critically important to getting us to November with a full democracy for our folks. One is that we need federal agencies to register to be voter registration sites, because we have federal agencies in every single part of this country. We sent a letter as a leadership conference to many of the cabinet members in May saying only 2 federal agencies had yet registered to be voter registration sites. It's voter registration month. We've seen record increases in women, for example, registering to vote, rightly, because of Dobbs. It is equally true for all our people in black communities to make sure they can get access to registering to vote from neutral places where they can feel safe and confident about their registration, in addition to all the work these organizations are doing. One other one, we asked for an interagency hate and bias task force, because that is fundamental to the federal government using all of its power to do what the president talked about last night.
As you can see, we had a working meeting. Let me go to question over here for the first time, and then we'll come back to you. Go ahead.
No, what we thanked him for reaching out. We thanked him for calling the family. Some of us have stayed in touch with the State Department. We wanted him to know that that was a continued concern of ours, and he gave us his assurance that it was a priority. I would not want to go further than that because I don't want to compromise the negotiations to try to get her and other prisoners. He stressed not just her, but we did not want to sit in the White House and not bring up Brittany Griner, and that we continue to concern.
So we're going to wrap.
Let me just say this before you wrap. 59 years ago, as we started, we talked about they had the Big Six. For the last 12 years, we've had these 8 legacy organizations, went through the last 3 presidents. the progress Black America has made is half of the Legacy 8 are women. There were no women in the Big Six, so we even have to correct ourselves as we go.
Thank you very much. And we're going to be available for one-on-ones if you want. Let me thank you all for participating and attending today. Thank you very much.
Your name made me say that.
Yeah. You can go one-on-one. Talk to me. Who you want to talk to?
There is a big difference.
Maya?
It's Solon.
Yeah. Good to see you. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Maya, this gentleman's dying to talk to you.
I was trying to remember myself. Not just exactly what it said, but how much we should say. But I'm glad you said it.
Yeah,
I'm glad you
but
said
you
it.
came back and corrected that it wasn't a part
Yeah. It wasn't a correction, but just that's what they do. That's what they do.
That's how we do. We gotta fill in and compliment each other.